Hello everyone, my name is Dean Chessman, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made this flocking simulation using pops in TouchDesigner. Okay, let's get started. Let's build our sort of basic structure of our project here. First of all, I am using version 2025 30280 on a Mac, and who knows how much of this will change as the experimental version of TouchDesigner changes. But I hope overall the principle of flocking should all be pretty much the same. I definitely will follow the same rules and things like that. So I'm going to start out by adding a point generator pop. Just going to use this sort of sphere of points here. I'm going to change this down to a much lower number just so it's easier to visualize. Let's do like 400, or just easier to deal with, just in case. Sometimes with pops, especially on a Mac, it seems like if I'm connecting too many points to a new operator, sometimes the whole thing will kind of blow up on me. So I'm going to keep it low just as I build, and then when I'm done, I can come back and I can pump that number up quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and build my feedback loop. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to create a null. I'm going to say this is my start of feedback, and then I'm going to take that into a feedback itself, and then that's going to go into my end feedback. Oops, sorry. It's called a null that I'm going to rename to end feedback. There we go. And then this end feedback will drag back into that feedback. And I'm going to drag this to the very beginning. So with pops, there's kind of these two sort of, or maybe two or three actually different sections we should worry about. So in this kind of initial section is where we're going to set up our different attributes. During our feedback is where the actual animation and sort of calculation of frame by frame is going to be. And then afterwards is going to be any sort of post-production. Here's where we're going to actually copy some geometry onto these points. So let's flesh this out a little more. So with each of these points right now, I have just this point attribute and I have a normal. And if I activate this with A, right click and say display attribute vectors, and I want to display the normals, I see the normals by default are on this sphere point generator are all just facing directly outwards. And from playing with it, I know I want to mix that up a little bit. I'm going to give these a random direction. So I'm going to add a random pop, and then instead of having it randomize the P, I'm going to actually have it randomize the N. So I'm going to change this to set, and I'm going to say for the attribute I want it to be the N. Now if I activate on this and I visualize that same normal, I see, oh, these are all going in random directions. But if you notice they're all going in the same direction, that's because I want to make this from -1 to 1. And now they're all in nice random sort of directions to start. Okay, so step one. So let's see, where should we go next? I want to kind of logically walk through how flocking works, and then I'll come back and I'll set up some more parameters in the beginning because I want to show you like where you might run into as you're doing pop feedback sort of projects. So let's talk first a little bit about the rules of flocking. So if you're not familiar with the rules of flocking, there's three main rules. You have the attraction rule, where you have your different points are going to be attracted towards each other within a certain range. And then there's going to be an alignment, which is that the points are going to want to try and travel in the same direction as the other points around it. And then there's the repelling or avoid force that's going to be not wanting to get too close to the things around it. So you see this sort of flocking in nature all the time. So you can imagine like what we're going to do here looks kind of like fish swimming around. You have a school of fish. They're all trying to kind of swim with the other fish. They're all trying to sort of avoid the fish that they're too close with, but they all want to go in the same direction. So that's the way we want to think about this. So first of all, we have these sort of distances that we want to do these calculations in. And I'm going to set those distances with some constants. And I'm going to call this constant distances. And then I'm going to make three channels. I'm going to call this one attract. I'm going to call the next one align. Oops. And this one, I'm going to call this repel. And for playing with this a little bit, I mean, you notice my sphere is about 1 by 1 by 1 sphere size here. And I know I want to start attracting around the 0.5 mark. So about, half a distance away from this whole sphere, they're going to start trying to attract each other. And then the align, I'm going to do about a 0.3, and then the repel 0.25. this is just for me playing around with it a bunch, but really you can play around with these. You get there's a lot of knob turning you can do with flocking to get different sort of effects, how much clustering, how close you want them to get together, how random you want it to look, things like that. And so I apologize for not kind of showing the exact process, but really there's a lot of knob turning to get it exactly where you want it, I think. So now I have these distances. I want to start maybe creating some attributes based on these distances. So what's great is with the new pops operators, we have some new operators called neighbor. And let me talk through a little bit about what this does. So this is going to do calculations based on the closeness of other points to every point. So every point is going to run through and look for their closest neighbors based on these different attributes. So the max neighbor distance is how far away it's going to look. So for in this example, I'm going to calculate, this is going to be for my neighbors for attract. And so therefore, I'm going to bring this chop over for the value of the distance. And then if I go in here, I'm going to leave this as default. The output, instead of the neighbors themselves being the output, I actually want an inverse distance weighted average for the value. So I'm going to actually do the location, the point location of the neighbors for each point. And it's going to be calculated not by the average exactly of all the points around it, but by weighting more towards the points that are closest to that point. So if you can imagine in a flock or in a swarm of fish, you have the closest one is the one you're probably going to be attracted the most to because it's the one kind of biggest in your vision, but you're still going to be generally attracted to any other ones that are in your vicinity. So that's what this inverse distance weighted average is going to do. And then you'll see here, it's the max neighbors for average gives you how many different neighbors you're going to make this calculation based on. So right now we're doing 100. I'm actually going to bring that down, but I'm going to also make this into a constant. That way I can play with this based on, or you can play with it too, based on your performance. The machine might want, like, depending on how many points you're calculating, you can move this up or down because you're calculating for every single point, you're calculating a max of this many neighbors. So we'll call this max neighbors. I'm going to set it to just 15 for now. Activate that. I'm going to drag it on here, set that. And then, so like I said, the point attribute I want to calculate the average of is the P attribute, so the point position. You'll see there it's bringing everything together into their point average. This is a great reminder. I'm hitting 1 over here to reset it, but it's not resetting because I haven't set up my keyboard in. I'm going to activate that and drag it onto my feedback and put it on both the init and on the start. So you'll see right now it's drawing everything together into their average points for the closest points within those ranges. It's obviously not what I want in the end, but that's explaining what's happening. Okay, so now what do we have? So we have now a point position, but it's overriding my point position. That's not what I want. So I'm going to add this prefix. What that's going to do, if you can see down here, when I clicked add prefix, it made this neighbor P. So that now is the average position. So you'll see now my original positions are unchanged, but now I have this neighbor position, which is that average position within this 0.5 distance range. Okay, so that's what I want to steer my points toward, is that average position. Okay, but I also want to do this for my other rules for flocking. So for now, I want to use the same sort of idea for my for repelling, because my attract I want to push towards, my repel I want to push away from, and so I'm going to use the same exact calculation. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And then instead of this 0.5, I want to use my repel distance. This is all the same here. But if you notice, I'm going to have this neighbor P value as well. So really, since I'm using it in 2 different places in this feedback loop, I'm going to want to rename this neighbor P value to something else. So I'm going to insert another operator here, just a math. And I'm not going to change any parameters except for I'm going to take my neighbor P and I'm going to rename it to attract P. So the position I want to be attracted to. And then I'm going to bring this guy in for my repel. Let's rename this to keep this clear. this is going to be my repel calculation, or to get the repel point. I want to take that. I want to add another math afterwards, and I'm going to change this neighbor P to repel P. Okay, so let's organize this a little bit. I'm going to do add an annotation box here so it's clear where everything is. I'm going to hold down the Option button and right click and drag. And I'm going to call this section attract. I'm going to Option click and drag here. Call this repel. And then I need to also do a similar calculation for my alignment. So the alignment is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to add another neighbor. I'm going to set the alignment distance. And I'm also going to do the same inverse weighted average. But instead of looking at the P position, the average point position around me, since I care about what direction, what I want to align in the direction that my neighbors are facing, I'm going to use the N, my normals for that. And then I need to make sure I add prefix. Now I have this neighbor normal. And just for the sake of clarity later, I'm going to do the same sort of thing and rename this neighbor normal to align normal. Okay, so now I've got an align normal property. Let's make an annotation, call this align. Okay. Now next, what do we want to do? We want to start doing some actual calculations. So this is for each of these values, I now have an average point that I want to be attracted to. I have an average point that I want to be repelled from, and then I have an average point or an average direction that I want to steer towards. And really all of these I want to use to steer towards them. So I'm really only going to be changing the normal value that I'm facing. And then I want to step through the direction of that normal. I want to move in the direction of that normal. So let's set that up. So this is going to be our calculation section here. So I'm going to use a math combined, and I'm going to start doing some math here. So first of all, I want to look at the distance between where my attraction point is and where I am. So I'm going to take my attract point and then my position. And then the difference between there is my delta P. So the distance I want to travel between those two, or the distance between my attract point and where I currently am. And then I need a force. I need an amount that I want to actually try moving towards those. So let's add in here a new constant. In fact, yeah, let's go ahead and make a new one. So constant, and this is going to be called our constant forces. Let's create the same three here. Attract. Let's go ahead and add force to it. Align force and repelled force. And with these values, again, this is a little bit of a science sometimes and just kind of a guessing. But if I would imagine, since I'm using a force and I know I'm going to be going in a feedback loop with this, and I know I'm going about 60 frames a second, and I think about the distance I want to travel in that 1 second, I don't want to travel like 1/10, right? That would be way too fast. I'd get there in 10 frames. I more like 1/100th is probably a better guess, right? So let's start there. We'll do, from getting from where I am to my target, saying that's 0.01 is probably a decent like amount to think about moving per cycle of my feedback loop. So, okay, so where do we use this? So this is coming back to, what should I say? Have some extra there. Okay, now that I've got these forces, the next thing I want to do is take these forces and use it as my steering force to move towards that. So this is my distance between where I want to be and where I am, but it also can be used as my vector that I could follow to go directly there. So if I add this to my normal by some small amount, it's going to steer my normal a little bit towards where I want it to be. So if I take my delta P, and I'm going to multiply that by my force. So I know this is my attract force, and then let's see. Attract force, we'll put that in there. And then I want to go ahead and add that to my norm, or I want to add that to my normal. So we take our normal, take our attract force, and then we are then adding it to our normal. Okay, so I've got my calculation here for my my attraction force. And then next I'm going to do the same thing, but then for my repelling force. So let's see if I can just swap these out. I'm going to change from attract P to repel P. My delta P, that's all the same. We're going to change this to repel force, and then also repel force. And then make sure that's tied in there. And looping through. Always am not updating. Oh, here's a great chance for me to illustrate how I get out of this. You might run into this when you're TouchDesigner. Sometimes when I'm on my screen, I zoom in and out and I get stuck in like a previewer. You can actually go back out to your project up a level, like by clicking up to the root and then slowly zooming back in with your scroll wheel. And you get back to where you need to be. Pro tip. Okay, and then our next thing is going to be, I know why this hasn't updated. So we're just changing the normals. We haven't changed the position of anything yet. So we're just updating normal to this point. So if I actually right click on this, if I view and then display vectors and then display the normals, they want to go somewhere. Like if I restart it, you kind of see them, jump, but then they go to where they want to go, but then they're not actually moving because I'm not actually doing the math yet to update the actual positions. That's why it's not doing anything yet. Okay, so sorry about that sideline there. So let's then now do our last part here of with the math. Let's do math combined. Now let's just simply so now we have a line that we want to add to our normal. So we have our align in, which is our target. And that also therefore means the direction like we want to start heading. And then we want to add our align force. Did we use the wrong one here? No, we used the right one. Okay, align force. And then saying this align force just for clarity's sake. And then we are going to add that to our normal. Okay, I just remembered another thing we didn't probably do correctly. This, we want to repel. So instead of going towards this force, we want to go away from it. So I'm just going to do A minus B. And then let's go ahead and start getting these moving. So I'm going to do a step speed here to take a step towards the normal in whatever direction the normal is pointing. So let's call this step. And then I'm going to call, I'm going to say 0.2 is kind of the amount that I want to step towards the normal each cycle. So let's do that. It's just going to be taking my, just math combined. Sorry, still getting used to some of these new operators. So with this, I want to take my my normal and multiply it by this step amount. And I'm going to call it something else, but then I want to override my normal. I'm going to call this step. And then I'm going to add that to my position. Okay, that's something. But if you notice, it's just kind of like exploding out. Not exactly what I want yet, but we've got some movement. Okay, maybe the step is a little too big. Maybe I want to actually, instead of 0.2, I want 0.02. See if we can at least get a little blocking before we do some extra additional things here. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to helm on this. There we go. Okay, so I mean they're at least starting to move from the middle, and they start flocking towards each other, but then they just sort of continue on into forever once they get outside of like the attraction zone of each other. Okay. So what can we do to prevent them from just flying off into infinity? We can do a centering force. So to center them, it's actually a pretty simple calculation. Again, I'm going to use the math combined. And the vector direction to go towards the center is just the reverse of what the actual position of the point is. And so if I let's see, let's make a new constant here. This is going to be called my centering force. And let's see, what do I put for this? Yeah, this will be a very, very small amount because I'm going to put 0.003 as the centering force. So we're going to take our position, P, and then multiply it by our centering force. And then we're going to call this centering. And then we're going to take our position and subtract it by that amount. And what's great about this is that this is inversely like the strength of this is based on how far away from the center I am. So the force will get larger and larger the further away I get from the middle of the simulation. Oh, right. I keep making this mistake. So I don't actually want to change my position here. The only place I want to change the position is this sort of move step here, right? So I'm gonna call this move. We don't want to actually move this here. We want to point towards the center more. So let's change this to the end. Now, maybe if we are A minus B, all right. All right, I found it. I forgot one step here on my alignment. So in the alignment, I just started taking the normal for where I wanted it to go, and I assigned my force there. But this is my target alignment. This is what my neighbor's alignment point that I'm aligning towards is. So I'm going to add a new block. So if I right click here, I can insert a block above, and I want to do A minus B. I want to take my align and subtract my current normal from that. And this is going to be my delta N. And then I want to take that delta N. Then that's what I want to multiply by 4. So now let's see what that looks like. Okay, now I'm getting a much more swarming sort of look now. This is what I was looking for. So I skipped that one step with the alignment, and that was the main problem. So I needed to take that step of the distance, the difference between my two align points. Sorry about that, but I've only done this a couple times now. Okay, so now where am I at? I'm going to actually right click and view. Actually, let's see. Why isn't the element on there? Right, there we go. Hit H to home. So now I'm seeing all my kind of different flocks here. They're coming back to the center with my centering. And they'll kind of like, find their little flock areas. One thing that I like to add on top of this as well, is a turbulence. So I'm going to add that in here before my centering actually. And I'm going to do that with a noise pop. And I'm going to use my position to look up the position in the sort of noise lookup field. And then I want to take my point. What else do I want to do? I want 3 values of noise. And let's see, an amount of turbulence that I want. I'm going to put into a constant as well. I'm going to call this turbulence. I'm going to put in 0.02 for the force that I want to add to that. I'm going to copy that onto activate, drag it on here, add it onto this amplitude here. And then for the output, I want to actually, I'm not adding noise to my position location. I want to add that actually to my normal, like the directions that I want to bump it in like little small amounts each time. And so, I do want to use the P for the lookup position. So, and then for the output, I want to add it to my normal. And hit reset. And I'm just kidding. A flickery what? Because turn off noise. I don't care about that. Man, I am hitting so many funny problems on this. Let's see. Well, there we go. I don't know what I did. I just paused and restarted and did what I needed to do. This is the experimental version. I'm sure this will all get fixed easy enough. So, okay, so now I'm getting kind of a little more kind of fun random. Like some of these birds decide, hey, I'm going to peel off from my group here and kind of swarm around in different ways. Okay, so let's take a look at this with more points. So if I go back to my original point gen and I'll go from 400 to 4,000, hit 1 to restart. Now I should get more interesting groupings happening. Some interesting movement. Okay. And now I want to use these points to actually, put some real geometry on top of these points. So I'm going to do that. So what's nice with Pops is they also have geometry sort of baked in. And I'm going to make a little classic Boyd triangle, but do it in 3D with a tube that I'm going to pinch off on one end. So the radius on one side is 0. And I'm doing this, I think, 0.02? No, 0.2, I think is all it was. Yeah, so I want, this nice kind of Boyd shape. I want to bring my complexity way down, pretty much as far down as it'll let me. And then I know I'm going to need to transform this to get it to face the right direction. So I'm just put the transform in there now. And then I'm going to copy this onto these point locations with a copy pop. So copy, and then I'm going to drag my points to the second input. You'll see all my nice points copied on there. And then inside of these, the copy pop, I can go into the template, and it's already copying the points positioned correctly. But the real kind of magic happens when I turn on this template rotate to vector, and then it's automatically choosing the end. And if I look, I can see they're rotating correctly, but I need to get it pointed in the right direction. And I think all I need to do is, let's see, can I even just do it here in the z-axis? Yeah, so actually I didn't even need my transform for that, but I can use it to bring my scale down just to make these more visible, more interesting. Okay, so now I've got these points. I'm gonna get rid of these because these are what I'm working with now. And then I'm gonna go ahead and render these. So with Pops, I can just go straight into a geometry, drag that out and hit tab to bring that up, and then add a geometry. And if I do that way, I say this every time, but I do it because I get so many questions. If you drag out and hit tab to add your geometry, instead of just double clicking on the background and hit geometry, if you do that, you don't get an input. But if you drag out and hit tab and add your geometry, it'll automatically add it with the input and the correct rendering flags and everything turned on the inside. Okay, so let's get this guy material. Oh, sorry. It's called material. Let's do a Phong because we're going to use some lights here. Grab a light, grab a camera, grab a render. Okay, and then I'm going to, want to send this out to social. So I'm going to go 1080 width by 1920 height. If you got the free version, you can do 720 width by 1280 height. And okay, let's actually drag this to an out. And then I'm going to right click and do my out so I can kind of keep it, keep the viewer up here in the corner to see what I'm doing. Okay, so what do I want to do first? First of all, I want to sort of take my camera and I want to kind of go down and back a little bit. So like imagining I'm like a little ocean like videographer. I want to be under the surface and looking kind of up this school of fish as it's swarming around me. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm resetting so I can see where the starting point is. And then, okay, so next I want to go into my light, and I know I'm going to want to have some shadows. And then for my type of light, I'm going to use a distant light, or maybe I'll actually use a cone light so I can have like this sort of like shadow coming through the ocean a little bit. And then I'm going to activate and move my light to be up above. So I'm shining down onto this sort of school of fish here. Let's change to distant light actually, because I want it to be like stuck on my cone distance here. Okay, but I want to go from above. That way my shadow is on the other side of these sort of, or what show up here, right? Okay, so let's see what else we're seeing here. We think some little like artifacts in there. What are these extra little points showing up? Not showing up in there. Oh, I did it again. All right, back to my root, and then zoom back in. Okay. What else? Let's keep moving on with our post processing here, and then we'll figure that guy out. All right. So if I right click on here, I'm going to add a ramp behind it. So this might be a trick some of you might not know. If you go in, you can add a ramp. And nothing's happening right now. Obviously, I want this to be a vertical ramp. But then in my output, I can say you can set just the resolution, but you can also use your compositing operation to put this underneath it. So that's a way to add the background image. All right, let's figure out where these little guys are coming from. This might just be another fun experimental problem. Okay. Render. What are you referencing, render? Feedback? Okay. Let's just have our geometry and reference geo1. There we go. Can we get rid of it? Yep. Okay. So that's looking good. What else can we add to this? So one of the other things I had done was add an RGB delay. So I'm going to pop into my palette here and image filters, go to RGB delay. And that's a little extreme. Let me tie it in so I can get it on my viewer. Okay, so that RGB delay is more than I like. Usually my defaults kind of go down like to 531 just to make it subtle. And what I was going for with this is hoping to get a little bit of that chromatic aberration or like sort of glimmer you get like from fish underwater for their scales. So I have this color offset, but it's a little too sharp, right? And so I'm going to put that through a couple things. I think I'm just going to do a little feedback loop to soften it. So put it through a crossover and a feedback and feed that together and plug that in. And you can see with that, I can decide how much to sort of soften the motion, kind of smear things around, get a little almost motion blur, like a fake motion blur in a way. And then I'm going to, just because there's a feedback, I'm going to put my keyboard in and tie that in just to make sure if I'm, recording or whatever, and I hit feedback, I want it to, or hit reset, I want it to go back to 0. What else are we doing here? Our shadows are looking a little light for some reason. But maybe I can turn let's turn our diffuse all the way up on our fog. Get a nice higher contrast on that. And then what else? Okay. The other thing I added with this was that a bloom, usually good for any sort of realistic looking thing we want to add. We come in, we can tweak some of these intensities. Let's see what else. Let's go also just like drop the value, drop the saturation on this a little bit more. Kind of losing my intensity. There we go. All right. So now we're getting a little more of that, like, looking through the water, getting a little bit of that blur coming out from the light bouncing around. I'm also going to add a levels in front of this as well. And let's play with that a little bit to make it a little more dramatic. Great. Maybe I'll tip my line a little more on the camera side of my school of fish here. Cool. I'm happy with that for now. So anyway, hope you can play with this and kind of, twiddle around, maybe try some different geometry on there. Another kind of fun thing to do with this is before the feedback loop is over, if you add a limit, you can, reduce your position to, it'll be clamped inside of a box. Play around with ideas like that. I'm going to turn that off for now. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of really fun things you can do with pops in this. I think there's probably also more efficient ways to do this that are not, putting 3 different neighbor pops in here, but I think to kind of illustrate how it's all working, it's good enough for this. I mean, I'm still getting 60 frames a second with 4,000 of these moving around. And it feels very natural. It feels like it's actually working. Okay, so if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see my future videos. It also just helps me know which things people like and don't like from what I make. Also, if you want access to this project file that I just made, that you can subscribe to my Patreon. It starts at only $5 a month, and you can get access to it and all of my other previous projects that I've made. And then also of note is that I am a freelance TouchDesigner developer. So if you're working on a project and you feel like you might need some help with it, you can give me a ring, find my contact info down in the links below, and see if there's something I can help you out with the project. And yeah, I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.